The REBT Advocates, number 10, with Dr. Michael R. Adelstein and me, Tommy Bateman. Let's get started.
Michael, you wrote a book called it's called 3 Minute Therapy, and in it you have what's called the 3 minute exercise. Now, this is REBT based. Can you walk us through what the 3 minute exercise is, and then we can go step by step from there?
Certainly. And as you know, Tommy, one of the main goals of REBT, which in my book I call 3 minute therapy, is to help people change their thinking, because our thinking is what generates our emotions and behavior. And usually people come to us because they're dissatisfied with certain feelings they have or certain behaviors and they want to change it. So we explain to them that gets back to thinking, and particularly thinking in terms of absolutes and demands: must, should, supposed tos, have tos. So the 3 minute exercise is designed as a spreadsheet to help people change their thinking. And the structure of it is there's an A, B, C, D, E, and F, and all these denote a particular part of a person's thinking and behavior. And I usually tell people to start with C, because that's what they're most aware of. And C stands for undesirable behavioral or emotional consequences, which means simply things you do or emotions you have that you like to change, such as anxiety, depression, anger, guilt, or behaviors such as procrastination and addiction. So let's take an example. Let's suppose that your mate criticized you, or your friend criticized you, and you felt hurt. So, and you don't want to feel hurt. Doesn't help. It just makes you feel bad. Doesn't improve the situation. So at C, you would write hurt. That's the emotion that you'd like to change. Undesirable emotional consequence. Then you would go back to A. A stands for activating event, or the situation you were in right before you felt disturbed or hurt in this case. And that would be, my mate criticized me. So at A, my mate criticized me. At C, I felt hurt. But as we know, it's never A that causes C. Rather, it's our thinking about the situation that causes our emotions. That's the way humans work, not the situation itself. And our thinking is B. B is belief, or if you have a disturbed emotion like hurt, anxiety, resentment, it's a disturbed emotion coming from a demand, a must or a should. So normally a typical situation is, my mate criticized me. B is, I must not be criticized because I prefer not to be criticized. And this proves not only that I did poorly in this case, worst case scenario, I did poorly, but it proves I'm a total loser, I'm a failure. So then we have a fuller diagnosis of the problem. A, my mate criticized me. B, I said to myself, I must not be criticized. This proves I'm a loser, and that leads to feeling hurt at C.
So this is like we're halfway through the problem here. We've done a good job of diagnosing what's going on. We see that it is our irrational or inflexible thinking, a demand type of thinking on what has happened to us, which we have no control over to begin with. And then that irrational belief about what happens to us leads to that disturbed emotion, that undesirable emotion.
Yes, exactly. So, so the question is, since it's your belief that's the main culprit that causes your hurt, not the situation, question is, how can you change your belief? And since your goal in that belief makes sense, I prefer not to be criticized. We don't want you to give up your goal and say it doesn't matter at all if I'm criticized, who cares? Rather, we want you to keep the goal as a preference or a strong preference. I prefer not to be criticized. So how do you keep the goal of avoiding criticism but getting rid of the must about it? The answer is go on to D. D stands for disputing or questioning the irrational belief. And that's a simple process. You just take what you have at B and put Y, or what is the evidence, in front of it. And we get, what is the evidence I absolutely must not be criticized? And you could add, how does it magically turn me into a total loser if my mate criticizes me? So those are good questions at D.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go on to answer the question E, effective new thinking or effective new philosophy. And if you think about it, you normally come up to the conclusion there are no musts, there are no shoulds. There's absolutely no reason why I absolutely must not be criticized. If I'm in a relationship, of course, at times I'll be criticized and I'll criticize, although I strongly prefer not to be criticized. And then the more you write at E about why the must is false, the more meaningful E tends to be, and the more persuasive it tends to be. So I'll suggest a few more things at E. And one is, it is unpleasant, disappointing, and disadvantageous to be criticized, but not the end of my world. I don't like being criticized, but I definitely can stand what I don't like. I've survived criticism in the past, and I'll survive it in the future. Being criticized only proves about my worth at the very worst is that I'm an imperfect human who acts imperfectly, not a total loser. In order to have the positives and advantages of a fulfilling and meaningful relationship, it's necessary to have the disadvantages and the frustrations. And perhaps most importantly, it's not my mate's criticism that caused my hurt, but rather it's my unrealistic demands about it that's the culprit. And with practice, I can change my thinking and learn to unconditionally accept myself. Mm-hmm. I can still have a happy life if my mate criticizes me, although I would be happier if he or she did not. So those are some E's, some rational beliefs that contradict the musts and the shoulds. And once you internalize what you wrote at E, that leads to F, your new feeling, which would be still be a negative feeling. You don't want to be happy that you got criticized because it goes against goals, but it would be some appropriate negative feeling, such as displeasure, disappointment, frustration, discomfort, or great displeasure. You could have very strong, appropriate negative emotions without having negative emotions that are inappropriate that rip you up inside. So and then the way to get to internalize what you have at E, the rational beliefs, is by using the same learning process we use to learn most things, and that says practice, reinforcement, repetition is the way we learn things. So you write out the 3-minute exercises regularly, once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day, 10 million times a day. And the more you write it out, as long as it's meaningful when you're writing it out, the more it gets into your head, you start changing your thinking, thereby changing your emotions and your behaviors.
And I think something important to note is that the original B, the irrational B, was disturbing just because of that. It was irrational. It wasn't true. Most importantly, we had no evidence for it. And this is what makes this so powerful and rock solid, is that the effective new belief, the E, well, that has evidence for it. And if that solid evidence leads to a less negative or better feeling, so much the better.
Yes, that's a good point. And in doing 3-minute exercises, or REBT, you have a strong support, and that's reality.
Mm-hmm.
As you're
that's
saying,
right.
Tommy, reality is on your side. All musts and shoulds and irrational beliefs are fictions. So it means reminding yourself of the reality of the situation.
And I think the 3-minute exercise, and folks, I'm going to link to, Michael has developed a PDF which has the 3-minute exercise with examples on his website, 3minutetherapy.com. And what I think is very important to note is that REBT is, educational nature. You go to the therapist educates you on how to do REBT, just like you go anywhere else and learn how to do something. The more competent you get at it, you can be your own therapist in this way. It's very empowering, and I highly encourage you, and I know Michael does as well, to engage in this work. Follow up with Michael's book, which is 3 Minute Therapy. Read works by Dr. Ellis, Dr. Albert Ellis, and other REBT therapists out there. And yes, you can empower yourself to better regulate your own emotions.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks for suggesting this topic, Tommy. And I think if people listen to it seriously and conscientiously, they'll benefit from it greatly.
I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you, Michael.